Okay, so in that last video, we looked at how to combine the text file with a GIS file to incorporate some of that rain data into the shape file. We brought that into Rhino and Grasshopper, and this is what we've come up with so far. So let's begin to visualize this information, as well as give it some animation techniques. So first thing I'm going to do is clean up my grasshopper space a little bit. I really only use this portion of the grasshopper to move my points to where they need to be. So let's take some of that information and get rid of this part. So one of the first things we need to know is that vector direction that moved it. So let's go ahead and take one of these panels, drag it to the vector, select it, right click, and say copy data only. We only want the coordinates, not the branch number and line number. So let's just copy that. Then I'm going to make another one, double click, hit Command V to paste. Make sure that you actually hit backspace to get rid of any open space that will cause some issues. So I'm going to click out of that, drag this into my direction to replace that. Looks like it's still there, so that means it's working. Then I'm also going to do the same thing for the center point that it's scaling from. So again, I'm going to right click, copy data only. I'll go ahead and just disconnect this, double click, Command V or Control V to paste, place that line, and there you go. Everything seems to be in the same place, so we can go ahead and get rid of this. So now that we got our space cleaned up a little, we can begin to do some other transformations. So right now, this is supposed to be rain data, right? So it shouldn't be flush with the terrain. It should be some distance above it as if it's coming down from the cloud. So let's do that first. We're going to take a move component, drag that into there. We can give it a designated height. So let's do Z to go in the Z direction. And let's do a number slider of 15 less than 30 less than 45. And drag that into there so it starts off at 30 feet. I'll turn this off so it doesn't get a little distracting. I don't know, that looks pretty good for now. Let's maybe make it up a little higher. That looks pretty good. So this is going to be the start point of our data. So again, we have the points, the location. But the more powerful thing of this is, again, that precipitation data, all this information that's in our value chart. This first line for each one is the year 2006, the next one's 2007, 2008, all the way down to 2015. So this allows us to look at the annual data of each one of these rain gauge stations from year 2006 to the year 2015. So we really just want to look at it 1 year at a time. So let's look. We have the starting index is 0, and then it ends at 9. So if I go to Set, do List Item, drag that into there, and give a number slider of 0 less than 9. Let's move this down just so it makes sense next to it. Let's go ahead and copy and paste this. Drag this down. Now you can see it's limited it to just showing for now 2006. So there's 2.3, 3.6, 0.56, all in that same order. We go down and we can see that it goes down to list item 237. If I look at the points, you can see that the bottom of the list is 237. So we have all the correct values. So now with this, I can actually use, oops, let me show that again. Now what I want to do is take these numbers and generate a line that represents that precipitation value. So I can go over to curve and do line SDL. So first thing it's asking for is the start point, that's these points. The direction, in this case we want to make it a negative direction. So if I right click, give it an expression of negative x, that's basically going to convert the direction to a negative direction. So you can see the arrows or the lines are starting to go down. Then the length, that is going to be these values. So I'll drag that into there. And you'll see that now they all have their own unique value that's associated with that rain gauge. This will most likely be red. If you remember in this QGIS file, I look at these attributes again, every once in a while you'll see a null. Basically there was no data available for that. And that's what's giving that red mark, is that our line and Rhino is looking for an actual number, not a string or a word value. If I go and look at my parameters again, or my values, you'll see every once in a while some asterisks show up. I know there's a bunch at the bottom. And that's what's giving this issue. And I've done this enough time to know I believe there's about 24 of these. So what I can do is actually replace this with a numeric value. So I'll go over to Sets, Text, Replace Text, drag this into there as my text to look at. Fragment to replace, that's all these asterisks, so let's make ourselves a panel and let's do 24 of these. Alright, I think that's 24. I forgot to hit. So let's try that again. 1, 2, 3. Alright, let's try that. Now hit enter and that should do it. So I'm going to tag that into the fragment. Then it's asking, what do you want to replace those asterisks for? Well, if there's no data, it's probably safe to assume that it has a 0 value. At least for all intensive purposes of this, we want to do that. And let's compare this again. And so if I scroll down to where all those asterisks are, so the 220s, you can see now that those are all replaced by 0. Perfect. Now if I drag this into my new list value, it's gray, meaning it's working. So I'm pretty satisfied with these lengths. I don't feel the need to really scale them or make them a little bit longer. If I have to later on, I can always do that. Let's go ahead and get rid of this part now. So you can see that it's pretty decent contrast and variation. The one thing I'm not a huge fan of are these extremely long curves. Most likely because they're so close to the ones that are shorter that it might just be some data error. So we can trim those or at least make them a more reasonable length. So what I can do is I can go to Math, Utilities, and we're going to do a minimum component. What this is going to do is compare all these lengths with a minimum value. In this case, I'm going to do a slider of maybe 10 to 20. I'll start off high just to see what that does. oops, sorry, these should actually be these values. And then these will go into our length. So what it is doing is that it's basically returning, if there's one of these curves or a couple of these exceed this 12 length, it gets cut off at 12. So we can, again, bring that to something a little bit more reasonable within the rest of those range values. Obviously, it's not the correct solution, but for the purposes of just showing such an immense amount of data, I think this should be fine. So I'll maybe drag it a little shorter. Okay, that looks cool. So let's go ahead and turn that off. And now, again, because we're looking at precipitation, probably be a good idea to show them as some kind of sphere or something that looks a little bit more representative of rain. So I'm going to go over to my display, choose preview. I'm going to use one of these cloud displays. This one I've found to work pretty good. It gives kind of a blurred sphere appearance. So what I also have to do is take these curves and divide them by a length. So I'm going to drag that into there and basically decide what length. If I do 0.5, that's essentially going to make a point every half a foot or half a unit on these curves, which you could say is equal to half an inch of rain. I'll do that less than 1 just to see how that works. Because right now I can already tell you that those are looking a little tight. So if I do them every foot, drag that into my points, then I can start to even change the size and the color. So let's make the size about 0.5 this time. Let's turn that off. And as much as this pink looks pretty cool, I should probably pick more of a blue color. Let's choose something in that blue hue. I still like to pick more of a cyan color myself. It'll look better against the darker background too. Right now I have it as just a solid blue. If I want, I can even change the alpha channel to give it a little more transparency. Again, this is up to you on how you want to start to represent it. But now you can start to see that each one of these circles is representing an inch of rain in parts of the Las Vegas Valley. So again, this is really just showing the year 2006. I'm going to do one more thing. If I change this color to black, it'll help bleed it all together. So it kind of looks like it's in a nice focused area where the edges don't cause that distraction. So again, like I said, this is only showing 1 year's worth. This is our key item, that part that's taking those values and looking at each index. If I start to scroll this, it starts to show each new year. So you can start to see how all those values begin to change over that 10-year time span, which is pretty neat. Another cool thing you can do to add a little bit more depth of information to this is create some kind of text cloud at the bottom of these. So again, I'm going to go over to display, text tag. I'm going to take this line, I'm going to go to curve, choose point on curve. This will allow me to just have a line anywhere along those curves. In this case, I probably want it on the bottom. And something else I might want to do, because it's so close to the edge on some of these, that I want to extend that line just a little bit for the purposes of the text cloud. So if I go to extend curve, I can drag that into there, and give it 1 less than 5, drag that into both ends. That becomes the new distance or location for my text cloud. You can see if I extend that curve a little, just to give it some space. So again, it's looking for location, that's going to be this one. The text to display will be this, or let's use this one. And then again, I can give it a color. Let's go ahead and turn this part off. And again, just give it some contrast. Let's go ahead and copy and paste this. I didn't realize copy and pasting a color swatch would cause so many issues with this. So let's go over to more of a gray tone. There we go. So I might even make that a little bit darker, just so it's not too obstructive. That looks better. So again, we can drag this number slider and see how all that information changes. So that's cool that we can start to see that. The other thing that is important to do in this workspace is to create some kind of video camera or animation as well. So if I go to my layers, you'll see that I have a camera path already set up from the previous assignment. I have it where it starts at the top and then moves over and does about 1/4 of a circle turn to orbit around the space. I'm going to use this 1/4 one. I'm going to, again, reference it. I can go ahead and turn that off. So you can see there's my camera path. I'll go ahead and turn that off for now. Now I'm going to use another plugin for Grasshopper called, where is it? Horse/Rooster. And I really just need to use the set camera one. You can see that it's asking for your camera location, target point, lens. We don't really change these, and then an activate one. So for the purposes of this class, or for anyone else that's interested in this topic, we eventually edit this in Adobe After Effects. The set frame rate for the videos in After Effects is 30 frames per second. So keep that in mind. The next thing you have to decide on is how long do you want this video segment to last? If you want it to be 20 seconds long at 30 frames per second, you have to multiply those together. So 20 seconds at 30 frames per second, you're going to need 600 frames. 30-second long video is going to be 900 frames. 10-second long video is going to be 300 frames. You get the idea. So we are going to take this curve and divide it by however many points or frames we want in this animation. I'm going to go with 900 frames. 900 will keep it a pretty slow pace so that it's not too crazy in the animation sequence. You can see now there's 900 points. And with this curve too, I actually have it doubled up so it goes to the end and then it comes right back. So the next thing I need to do is, again, single it out to one location. So I'm going to go to Set, List Item, drag that into there. And now I'm going to do a number slider from 0 less than 899 because the 0 does count as a frame. So this will give us a total of 900 frames or points. So you can see now I just have that single frame for that point over there. And as I drag the slider, it begins to orbit around several times, it looks like. So I might have it even quadrupled up. Can't remember. So that gives me my camera location. The next thing it needs is that target. So you should also determine where do you want this camera to be looking. Again, I already have a point that's pretty much right in the center of this map. So I'm going to reference that and use that as my target. Again, I'll turn that off. The next thing I need to do is activate it. So I'm going to use that Boolean toggle, click in there and turn true. And you can see once I do that, it puts you in that first camera location. So now when I start to orbit, you can see how it starts to move around the space several times. So another reason we're doing it through Grasshopper is now, because we have the slider that's activating the camera, we can do a little bit of math application to make this slider change our index item as it's panning or moving around. So we have multiple animation sequences happening simultaneously. So again, the next thing you have to decide on is how frequently do you want this data to change from one year to the next. If I have 10 sets of data or 10 years to show a 30-second long video, it'd probably be a good idea to have them change every 3 seconds. So basically what that's going to mean is that by the time this gets to the 90th or the 89th unit, because that's going to be 3 seconds long at 3 frame rate or 30 frames per second. So let's just double click and hit 89. Basically, we want this to equal 0 still, and then when it gets to 90 to equal index item 1. So I can start off by going to math and division. So I need to take this value of 89 and divide it so that it equals still 0. And the thing about this index item is that it's going to take any number that's 0.5 or 0.51, I believe, and round that up to 1. So you'll see if I just say, you know what, I want this to be 89, that'll give it to be 1. If I do 88, oops, sorry, if I do it by 90, it's technically less than 1. When I drag that up there, you can see it rounds it up to 1. So in order to get it to be at that 0.5 range, so that still counts as a 0 index, I need to double this value or get close to double. So I'll double click inside of that and bring that up to 200 and start off at 180 and see what that does. So now you can see that it equals 0.49, which keeps it at index 0, which is exactly what we want. Let me see what happens if I do 179. I'm going to round it up. So you can still get away with 179. 178, what about that? Still at 0. It's at 0.5, okay. And 1.77, what about that? That'll change it. So exactly double the value. So 89 doubled becomes 178, that'll still keep it at that 0 range. I know this can get a little complicated, but just remember that in order to keep this index item within that frame, that you want to double its value. So again, I'm at 89, which is still within that first 3 seconds I want to show that first year. I divided it by the 178 to give me 0.5, which keeps it at 0. Let's see what happens when I change this to 90. Perfect, 90, now that value becomes just a little bit above 0.5, which translates to an index item of 1. Again, if I do 89 twice, or 178, that should still give me an index item of 1, but as soon as I go to that 179 value, it's not quite. Oh, I think I have to divide it by twice its value. So let's do that. So again, if I do 89, and then this value, instead of it just being a constant 178, it just needs to be double its value. So let's do which is 89 times 2. So now that becomes nope, that's not going to work, is it? That might take a little bit more math than I expected, but for the most part, this should get the job done.